It's hard to believe that has been 13 years, but well, still here and well, dedicated to the cause. I was seeing bins full of food, so I was asking questions: how many kilos you have in that bin, and why, and what is going there? How much does it cost you? And I couldn't get an answer. I would see that look on their faces, and why do you care? And he jumped in the water to have footage from underneath, and I was on the deck shooting. And they started to dump, but obviously the team at the time were not well trained and they didn't know where the organic waste would go, so it was not properly segregated. And you would see that in the beautiful water, and then comes the bin, the gray bin with the ashes. And I was like, no. And then they pulling the ashes and dump it, and the footage from below makes that huge cloud of ashes with the heavy particle that sank at the bottom of the lagoon and the partially burned items that floating around. You're like, oh my God.
Obviously, you're trying to tackle a hard to tackle problem, and we've heard your story. It's been challenging and surprising and shocking and all of those things. But what gives you hope? So what gives you hope about the future of how we consume food and produce food, and what is that one silver lining that keeps you going for the next 13? Hello and welcome to episode 34 of the Exponential Show. Today it is a pleasure of mine to introduce Ben Lephilibert. Ben, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
For those of you who don't know Ben, he is the founder at LightBlue and the co-founder and CEO at The Pledge on Food Waste. Ben, there's a lot that I want to talk to you about today, and I'm excited that you're here with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
The pleasure is all mine. So Ben, before we start, I just wanted to thank our sponsors, True Digital Park today, who are hosting us in their podcast room. If you're an international business or an individual, this is Thailand's most comprehensive soft landing spot for you. So if you're looking at business registration, visas and work permits, or immersion programs within the Thailand's business and cultural landscape, this is the place for you to be. So shall we, Ben?
Yes.
Perfect. So the first thing I think I need to do is congratulate you on your 13th anniversary as LightBlue. So your 13th birthday, in fact. So congratulations on a 13-year journey. I'm sure it's been quite a ride.
It has been a ride. It has been a serious ride. It's hard to believe that has been 13 years, but well, still here and well, dedicated to the cause. So motivated.
So I mean, I'm sure you're just getting started. But if you could maybe just rewind back to 13 years ago and maybe share with us your origin story of why you're doing what you're doing. What was that event or motivation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm considering myself as an accidental entrepreneur. It was never meant to be. I mean, I guess it was meant to be. It was never planned that way. Because I'm usually gut driven. I'm following my feeling. So no, I ended in Thailand even almost randomly. Initially, I'm French and Danish, and I happened to have a possibility to come to Thailand to sell home cinemas for a French company.
Interesting.
Which one day after I moved to that company in France to be trained, they told me, actually, you're no longer going. We're looking for champions, and you won't be one of them. So. You don't go. I was like, whoa. So I decided to come to Thailand and search for a job anyways. I was overly optimistic. I gave myself 3 weeks. First time I was setting foot in Bangkok.
Nice.
But I started to do my CV, my suits, and to knock on the doors of all the French companies I was potentially interested in.
Makes sense.
And I forced my way into Accor because I knew the name of the HR director.
I see.
I insisted, so the receptionist let the person come and meet me at the gate, basically, and he gave me an appointment the next day. Presented what I was doing earlier, which was working with my dad, but in an industry which I didn't like, which was agrochemicals.
I see.
And I mentioned that during my interview, and he said, "It's just interesting. There's a position that just opened on environmental certification for the network of Novotels in Southeast Asia."
Interesting.
And I was like, okay, but I had no knowledge in environment, certification, or hotel. And they were like, well, it doesn't really matter. Do you want it? Yeah. So that's how I started into the, I would say, hospitality and sustainability field. And then I left, came back, and actually then I started as a consultant. I didn't, again, pretty randomly, I heard of a project on greening the hotel industry in Thailand and the Philippines with the UN. And during that, I would say that mission, I had a lot of free time, but I was covering everything from energy, water, waste, chemicals, staff awareness, like kind of 360 of sustainability in hotels and waste in particular, but they were not talking about food waste. And the international certification were not talking about food waste, and I was shocked. So I was like, this is weird. So I was seeing bins full of food. So I would go around and I'm not a trained chef. I never worked in a hotel. So I was asking questions, how many kilos you have in that bin and why and what is going there? How much does it cost you? And I couldn't get an answer. I would see that look on their faces and why do you care? And I'm like, because this is stupid. I wouldn't say it, but that's what I was thinking. And then, well, that was it. I decided to build a methodology, convince my first hotel to let me try that methodology at the back of house. And at the time I was alone. So I wanted to answer that question, how many kilos a hotel that size would waste on a daily basis? Because I couldn't find the answer. And that's how it all started. So very, very granular, training the staff to weigh each and every single piece of food that would be wasted, collecting the data, reviewing their procedures, and then trying to implement change and measure the impact of that change, and doing that at 8 different locations across the hotel. Very comprehensive approach, but So that was I would say the origin of my work on food waste, and that was in 2013.
Wow. So yeah, it's fascinating, and it's a common theme that I hear from a lot of guests where they did not necessarily set off to do what they're currently doing and just stumble onto a field that they felt very passionately about.
Yeah.
So it's a very similar story, but I'm glad you're doing it in Thailand.
Me too, but it was a bit funny because luckily I managed to convince that hotel manager, right? But then I presented the results to the corporate office and they're like, yeah, good. I was like, what do you mean good? I mean, it's a slaughterhouse. What's happening there? The results are extremely encouraging. So what's next? And they were like, well, we're gonna let the hotel do some word of mouth. And I was like, what? And so I started to talk about the results to other prospects, present what we're doing. They were like, yeah, those guys are idiots. We do much better than that. And I'm like, but are you actually measuring? No. So okay, well, so you're just having the feeling that you're doing good.
Assuming that this.
So it was realizing that it was a topic that was not addressed at all. It was not being discussed. There was no studies. There was no benchmark. There was no solutions because it was not really a problem. So to me, I stopped here because I didn't go into like long, market studies and stuff. It was like, it's obvious. It's there, it's in plain sight, and it's everywhere.
Right.
So I paused for a moment. I was like, that's massive. And then I started to realize the environmental and social impact of food waste on top of the financial ones. And I was like, okay, that's it. I was looking for a lever to get the industry to move more, I would say, faster towards sustainability, being more sustainable. But there are some issues that are not financially, I would say, profitable enough to really pay attention to.
I see.
Or they are indirect costs, so they don't really care. Some would be, for instance, carbon emission is one, but if you look even at water, it's too cheap. So they pretend they care, but most of the time they don't. So here I identified this topic where I knew there was a lot of cash going to the bin, and that would be the trick to get the industry to pay attention to it.
Interesting. So you're right. I mean, I think the financial angle is something that it'll be easier to convince them on, right? Because outside of the CSR posts that they do on LinkedIn, I think a lot of businesses don't really care at their core, which is unfortunate for me to say, but that is.
It is, but it's true. They most of the time, besides the marketing aspect, no, they don't really care.
I can imagine. Would you also like to talk about the pledge on food waste and where that came into this 13-year journey?
Yes, it was interesting. So this was really like the origin, right, of our I say our work because it is our work, but at the time I was by myself. So moving forward, we were actually doing one hotel per one hotel. So then I started to have one intern, then two interns. I was like, oh, that looked like a team. And then we were very, very much going in depth. We were doing like 7 full days of food waste audits. Literally from Monday, first moment they opened the first kitchens, to Sunday night, and it was very, very granular in details, but we were too early. So all the data, all the learnings that we captured were presented, and again, they were like, never heard of this topic, why would that really be an issue? And they would prefer like to brush it away. I said, So we continue this way anyways, until, and that's where the pledge comes at play, we presented our solutions to TCET, Thailand Convention Exhibition Bureau, the government agency, that we're interested in finding new solutions for the players in the professional event space, and in that case hotels. So we said, hey, we could do a program on food waste, and they were like, okay, we're interested in providing subsidies. And we're like, okay, what about your subsidies subject to showing certain compliance against certain criteria, to make sure that the public money is well spent? You know, we're very concerned about public money, taxpayer money. And they were like, okay, so we presented a pretty comprehensive list. And they're like, whoa, that's a bit too intense. So let's water it down, keep a few of those. And it's okay. We can implement this approach. So that was the spin-off, and so we're like, but this is really cool because it's best practices that we kind of grouped and encapsulated into a system that is a holistic approach to food waste prevention. And those best practices are turned into criteria that they need to show compliance against. And we're like, this is great. So decided to create the Pledge on Food Waste as a certification organization, specifically for hotels, restaurants, canteens, and opened this in Singapore in 2018.
Interesting. Okay, so it's kind of very complementary to the work that you were already doing, sort of taking the next step on that.
And validating also because of what you mentioned, because for many of them, we were focusing on food waste prevention, training the staff, measuring, understanding, strengths and weaknesses, and implementing change. But, no end, no finishing line, kind of. So this was also an important aspect for many players to say, okay, well, when does it stop?
Right.
Even though technically it never stopped because they keep on preparing, serving, and disposing of food. But in that case, it was some milestones with a recognition. So the pledge became a third-party certification for hotels, restaurants, and canteens. That is currently the I would say the global leading certification in that specific space.
Awesome, that's great to hear, and I'm also glad to see that you started it here in Thailand and Singapore, and then took it global, because usually in a lot of cases, especially in the space that you're in, it usually comes from the West to our part of the world. So it's good to export some of that outwards as well. So.
And I had that question, why Thailand? I was like, well, it has nothing to do with a conducive environment, but this sort of topic, because it was not the case. It was just I happened to be here, so it was a personal. I think the development of my activity would have been much faster if I were in other region as a start. Now is different, but at the beginning it was felt a bit isolated.
I can imagine. So, speaking of the beginning, so you started from one hotel and then gradually built your way from there. Did you have any one project or milestone along the way where you felt that, hey, what I'm doing really makes a difference, or I'm really making a change?
A lot. Many of them, because every single project, I think we learn new stuff. We acquire deeper knowledge. We're crunching more data. We were realizing, we were lifting layers of the business model, trying to understand, go beyond the first answers we would get typically from the team. I'm thinking of a few. The first project abroad, typically. So it was with Soneva. That was in the Maldives. I brought in at that time my interns. But it's a super nice hotel, super intense. A lot of work, but very meaningful because of the destination, the distance, the carbon emission related to bringing food there and then disposing of it is extremely high, the cost as well. So that was one of the milestones. Another very meaningful one was when we first started to work with Hyatt. So Grand Hyatt Singapore was definitely a milestone because they were taking the whole set of our solutions all under one roof. They were a flagship hotel for the group in the region, and that became our entry door. So we went from this hotel. They saved $100,000 in 10 months and made it public. Then we went to the corporate office. They opened the doors or let us present to 9 pilot hotels, and from those 9 pilots, we became official supplier for APAC and reached 55 hotels. So that was definitely one of those milestones.
I can imagine. Yeah, I think it's good to reflect on the wins as well, right? It kind of keeps you going and say, hey.
You have to, otherwise you just go to bed and forget about everything.
In your journey so far, so like you mentioned, there's been quite a growth in terms of the number of hotels and partners you're working with. Is there still some sort of a misconception or misinformation or myth that you're trying to sort of address in the food waste space?
No, there are plenty. It's interesting. So, I would say there are some classic that I would share because that's the one we usually share with when we present our solutions. So to me, I was always trying to understand. So with the result that we have, with all the measurements and kind of the baseline that any standard, let's say, hotel is starting from, and how much it costs them on a yearly basis, why are they not putting that much higher on their agenda to tackle food waste? So we identify several reasons. One is that most of the time there are very few. If you take the entire industry, there is probably 3 to maybe 4% of all players that are actually monitoring food waste. So they don't collect data. So they guesstimate or do some spot check, but very often is not done in a comprehensive way. So they look basically at wrong data. They look at something like this when the issue is like that. In the same vein, most of the hoteliers tend to think that food waste is all about the buffet. The buffet is the visible part of the iceberg. But once you start monitoring food waste throughout the entire hotel, you would see that out of the 4 categories that we're tracking, which are spoilage waste, preparation waste, that's behind the scene, buffet waste and plate waste. Buffet waste in itself, plate waste is the customer, buffet waste is only 10 to 15%. So if you focus only on your buffet waste, you're only looking at a small percentage of your whole operation. So that's another one. And then there are some stuff that are linked to the monitoring. If you don't measure, you don't put a price tag on it, so you don't really have an issue. But at the moment you start realizing that 1 kilo of food waste, you go $3, $4, or $5, sometimes much more than that. You multiply it by the number of kilos per day, per week, per month, per year then hoteliers start to realize that, wow, this issue is costing us several $100,000, sometimes up to $1 million plus USD per year.
Wow.
But that brings us to the last misunderstanding, which I was pretty slow to realize and unveil, which is the business model shows that actually the one that are paying for food waste are not the one that we were dealing with. The management teams are not financially the companies that are paying for food and for food waste. It's the owners that are behind.
Right.
So, but since we're never really dealing with owners, and owners are not aware of this issue, that was also one of the reasons why the industry was kind of trying to hide it under the carpet and say, well, that's fine. Everything is under control.
Yes, it's not my problem.
Yes. And it is, but I want to make sure nobody hear about it, especially upstairs. Yes.
Makes sense. Yeah, now that you put it, it sounds obvious now, but things like, for example, even my perception as a consumer was just the plate waste and the buffet waste. I didn't even know there were the 4 categories, but my perception of food waste was just that what I saw in buffets on plates, but never thought about what's happening in the kitchen itself, where a lot of the waste might be happening.
Yeah. And this is also one-on-one kind of lack of knowledge that we're trying to address, because we also have, out of our different type of solutions, we have everything related to learning and education for professionals, and on this, even like the executives are hardly trained on this sort of issue, so they don't ask or not being asked this sort of question. So it's fine. They are running with existing financial KPIs that they have been taught, and that's the only one that matters. When we come in, we're trying to bring additional sets of KPIs and say, okay, it's good to look at this issue this way. What about we look at it from a different angle, typically adding volumes, quantities. So very often, commercial kitchens would be running on how much I spend on buying, how much I sold, and is my ratio good or not? Right. But they don't really look in terms of volumes, volume purchased, volume lost, and being able to see from that angle, through that lens, how efficient they are. So that's what I call the food efficiency index, which I understood was not proper English, but it didn't really matter. I thought it was a good acronym. So there's a lot of missing pieces out of the puzzle that is also linked to the way professionals in the industry are educated, trained, and then the way they are reporting on their performance and their expectations from either their boss or the owning companies. If you don't have this, then well, things continue the same way it was, and no question asked.
I can imagine. Is there also some education stuff that you're doing on the consumer front, or you're primarily focused on?
Little, not really. I mean, yes and no. So on the education front, now we work mainly with schools of hospitalities and culinary schools. Okay. So that would be universities that have bachelor or master degree in either F&B or hospitality, etc., or properly like culinary schools that we are working with. So that's more like training the future of the industry, which I think is super interesting and very meaningful, because we're trying to get them to to start from the right foot. But for the general public, I guess there is the public that is just following our pages, and then it's we engage them, and that's in the context of events. When we are now starting to work with events, we use touch points to influence their behavior. Actually, not only event, but also when we implement the pledge, one of the pillars is about how does the restaurant, the hotel, nudge consumers in reducing plate waste by being aware, not finger pointing, not blaming, but using different touch points to influence their perception and their own behavior to nudge them towards, well, reducing plate waste and having this feel good factor.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine it's a very fine line that the hotel needs to.
Exactly. They don't want to bother their customers and say, hey, you didn't finish shipping.
It's like your mom's finish shipping.
Yes, exactly. It doesn't fly, especially when it's expensive, and so brand standard. So that's also the challenge with educating the team in finding indeed the right balance. Brand standards, food hygiene standards, and well, guest satisfaction, 3 golden rules. That they must respect, otherwise it tips on the other side.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, we talked about your wins a few minutes ago. Now talking about, like we were discussing earlier, I'm sure it wasn't all smooth sailing so far. So is there like any like stories of frustration or even now, or maybe not frustration, maybe like even if it's a funny anecdote that you might have had with hotels or chefs or restaurants that you...
Oh yeah. Well, every day. Frustration. No. Frustration is the right term. It is still very slow compared to, and that's where I'm a very optimistic guy, because otherwise I would have dropped the ball way earlier for sure. So resilience, I think, is an essential component of being an entrepreneur and pursuing your own stuff, because you take hits all the time. Okay. So in terms of anecdotes, yes, I like the... well, at the beginning I was curious to ask, typically chefs. So, chef, how many kilos you think you're wasting? You know, and they would come up with a figure. And so they would say, maybe 50, 60 kilos. And if we happen to work with them, we would measure in a holistic, comprehensive way, and we'll see that the result were 4, 5, 6, 8 times sometimes higher than what they thought, because of this bias, because of they were afraid that it would look bad on them or reflect badly. So I remember one conversation where we were trying to work with a hotel, and we're discussing with the GM, and the chef is like, no, it's okay, we're already measuring food waste. I'm like, okay, so where are you? And it would be like, 8 grams per cover. And I'm like,
8 grams?
8 grams per cover.
Oh,
like, okay. I was like, fantastic. Okay, can we go in the kitchen and check it out? And we did, and actually it's pretty typical. It's the issue also with the self-reporting. If you don't have external verification, it's very hard to know the quality of the data. In that case, he was taking just one bin and then dividing by all the covers of all the guests. And I was like, okay, cool. But what about that bin and that one, and in your production kitchen and in the bakery? And you're like, we don't measure that. So easy. Those are funny aspects. And then frustration, I think some of the key frustration is sometimes we would have dropouts from customers. The results are just super good, both financially in terms of reduction, but they decide that, they put it as it's too much effort, or there's a change of chef or whatever, and they would quit, and you're like, doesn't make any sense. This are part of the frustration, and I would say is the pace that is very slow. When we know the urgency of climate change, when we know, I don't know if you knew, but like close to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions are related to food waste. It's like 3 times what the airline industry is emitting. Wow. If you take agriculture, it's 30%. So food is just like an essential pillar of our civilization and our ecosystem. We rely upon it, but we still kind of pretend that we can look away and that things will get better by some sort of miracle. And there is no genuine sense of urgency that is instilled from the top, and typically from the owners, whatever the structure is behind, to really accelerate change. And to me, it's a huge frustration, because we are really not heading in the right direction. And I have sometimes it really, it's heavy. The more you know, the more you want to cry. And when you know that there are solutions that exist, and it's just not happening for political awareness, laziness reasons, I can imagine. That kills me. I really wanna blow when I think of it too much. So I'm trying to.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, but I think the fact that despite all these sort of roadblocks, and I'm sure a lot of it is just resistance to change. It's just like, why put in that work? Kind of emotion from the people who actually have to do the measurements and implement the methodology. So. I'm glad you're still pushing through all of that resistance to change, because whenever you're trying to make a change at such a large scale, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people pushing back for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah, people love status quo, right? People love like, why change?
This is the way we have always done it.
And that really kills me. I mean, I understand the approach, I understand the reason behind, but if we were in a situation where it doesn't really matter if we do it or not, I will be fine. And we know that there is something way bigger than us that is going to impact every facet of our life and civilization. It's to me, it's hard to swallow.
Yeah. One hotel at a time.
I guess so, and one mind at a time as well. Yes, one plate at a time. That's true. But we better multiply. That's kind of what we were trying to do also, because one of the key aspects in what I was doing was to see, okay, how do we scale? How do we scale the business, but how do we scale our impact? Because at the time we were stuck with our model, which was we were doing one hotel at a time. So we would put everything into, as I mentioned, training, review of the processes, implementing food waste monitoring systems, and then training them, proposing change and measuring the impact. And that was one, and then another, and then another. Luckily enough, COVID happened to us. Everything shuts down.
Right.
The day we come back from actually this the Grand Hyatt in Singapore, and then from that point over the following 45 days, we got more than 50% of our yearly revenue cancelled in contract that were signed and ready to be implemented, but like slashed. And we're like, whoa! And then everything is in lockdown, and I have actually 45 days of cash flow, and we can't even move. So everything has to be thought through entirely. So starting to think and ask around. So some were saying, well, you can't do much, so just wait.
Right.
And like, no, we don't have the luxury. We don't have investors. It's like we need to adapt. So from that point, I called my team the next day and I said, guys, we need to focus on one thing that we have and that the other do not, which is knowledge. Knowledge about this topic, because when COVID happened, we're already 5-6 years in the topic. So I transformed my office into a studio. We built like technical modules on food waste prevention, and we started to shoot invitations. Some were free, some were paying, and we realized that actually there was a very positive response, because people were also stuck, so they had to learn online. We didn't realize that right away, but it's also that we have a much broader audience than we initially thought, because initially we were just working with hotels, restaurants, and then we started to have participants from universities, so lecturers, researchers, government officials, UN, etc., that would join, because they were somehow linked, because it was no longer constrained to the industry itself. It was food and food waste, but from a broader perspective. And so that was one way for us to scale. Then we were forced also to digitalize all our support services and to be able to deliver everything remotely without moving from the office. So we digitalized all the training and the implementation. And then we started one thing which is pretty exciting. At the time, it was on the shelf. We didn't try it before, and it was an opportunity. We started to build our network of accredited consultants, and basically it was starting from the idea that some wanted to learn about what we knew and apply it in their respective regions or countries. So we did the training online, got them to learn about methodologies, tools, and our solutions, so FIT, technology, and the pledge on food waste, and everything in between. And that's how we started this, I would say, scaling mechanism to have a network of consultants that are independent but have access to our resource and can offer to implement our solutions in regions where we're not. And that was a nice way for us to also scale the impact.
It's very interesting to know. And the fact that you were able to turn the COVID challenge, which was a problem for anybody remotely related to hospitality, into essentially an opportunity for you to pivot, to develop tech, to expand your network of accredited providers. So it's just the fact that you were able to pivot at the time and still stay afloat. While I'm sure it was a tough time. I mean, we can laugh about it now.
Exactly. I'm laughing about it because I can see myself. We were isolated. I had my kids' young age. My team remote, we couldn't see any customers, and I was literally working double shift. I was putting the kids to bed, starting again at 8:30 until midnight every single night. So it was a tremendous amount of work. And if there are founders that are listening, don't listen to a little voice that says, I'm tired, I'm gonna watch some basketball or whatever. Well, if you are in that phase, there are some moments where you just have to keep the heads down and work on it. And there is no other way. I'm laughing about it, but it was tough. But at the end, it was a massive booster, because I knew we had the capacity. But I may have delayed this maybe forever. I don't know. And then we were constrained. It was like this challenge becomes an opportunity to pivot. And when it was over, we were actually fully scalable and already had customers in more than 20 countries. So it became very very positive for us.
Good to know. So it's all sort of panned out in the long run.
Yeah.
Now, just sticking on the topic of, you mentioned digitalization of your processes, but off camera we were talking about the fact that you, in your early days, it was very heavily focused on very fastidious methodology and things like that, and then you transitioned into also sort of technology enablement. So if you could please tell us about FIT and how that transition into technology happened and how it helped you essentially make a better impact.
Yes. So at the beginning, there was this first project I was referring to. We were collecting, I was training the teams, the staff to measure, then use a spreadsheet and enter manually, pen and paper. Then the spreadsheet would be given over to an admin that would key in all the data online. And then so we started to have Excel, then it became a super Excel, accumulating a lot of data. Very tedious. Then there was the friend that was doing my website was like, hey, why don't you do a dashboard? So we started to do dashboard with graphs and all that. Oh, look good. Then we started to realize that we could sell it.
Right.
As I mentioned, I never been trained on finance, marketing, business whatsoever. So it was all like, filling and testing and seeing if we had a positive response. So then we had the dashboards and we're like, okay, that's better. Then I happened to have an intern that got in an IT intern who's like, hey, we could actually build an app. We're like, okay, cool. So the data collection would happen through an app. Okay, let's try it. And then it was the next iteration and next step forward. And then 1 or 2 years later, we're like, hey, we need to connect the scales because initially it was completely detached. Right. So we identified generic scales that could connect with the app that is used on any phone, Android or any tablet. Mm-hmm. And then it became Fit that is very different in the approach from what our competitors are doing, which is built on generic devices and with a very low capex, low investment in equipment, in order to scale and do not compromise on having multiple recording points. Because of the price, which was prohibitive, very often for more expensive technology, we say, no, let's keep it on the other end. So from that point onwards, we de facto became, as I mentioned, more of a tech and consulting company. Now it's the biggest chunk of our revenue is from technology, and it's really it's a great way to collect loads of data in a field where data is badly missing.
Right.
And that's really where we are filling a gap in terms of understanding their performance through this kind of a blind spot, and enables us to again identify the strengths and the weaknesses, because the way we organize, I mentioned the 4 categories: spoilage, preparation, buffet, and plate. So we do ratio per cover, but we do also food waste per cover per day, then per kitchen, then per category, then per shift, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and also per type of items that are being wasted. So we have actually an enormous data set, which we're still crunching the data, but I think it opens also a lot of doors to be able to then connect those data sets with the financial data sets that are being used by the organizations, and being able to make some correlations between the two in terms of purchasing, in terms of sales, and even in terms of forecasting, and we are currently launching a benchmarking system for our users because of
I got something stuck.
Is it stuck?
Yeah, but I'm good. Your story made me emotional.
I'm so touched. Finally, someone understands.
Yes, somebody else.
So data is essential because for too long the industry and that's related to the other components I mentioned. The industry is pretty good in, let's say, energy. I'm not talking about the financials. I'm talking sustainability related issues, right? Energy is pretty clear because it's their biggest cost. But anything related to, as I mentioned, water or waste or chemicals, etc., or carbon emission, those metrics are very, most of the time, inexistent. Right. So data, we are now influencing the way our partners are running their kitchens based on the data collected that help us to point to the inefficiency and get them to adapt.
That's very fascinating to know because, and I've seen this across industries, and you mentioned as well that just the fact that because things were not being measured earlier, a lot of things were being brushed on.
Yeah.
What's happening to my throat? Sorry. So you mentioned a lot of things were being brushed under the rug, and just I think relying on technology, it also sort of adds a layer of oversight, I imagine, that wasn't there, especially when it comes to food waste. So it's so the technology solves, I think, the most fundamental problem in food waste, that the fact that nobody was measuring it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's interesting because you also have this, I think there are different studies that were showing what they call it the audit effect, or even the measurement effect, is there is already a dip in terms of amount of food wasted from the moment you start measuring it, right? Simply because you measure. And people don't like to throw away food. It's just that it happens or they didn't think of it. But once you start thinking of it and measuring it, already has an impact on the amount that actually ends up in the bin.
It's fascinating to hear. And I mean, it's the audit effect, like you mentioned, is a cliche for a reason, right?
Yes, and it does work. You know, but I'm not a tech evangelist.
Right.
To be honest, I think that technology is very important. I think there is a bit too much hot air around the capacity of technology to address that issue and the root cause of that issue. So for us, it's a mean to an end. Even though we invest now a lot of resources on AI, well, that's more internally and in terms of organization of work and processes and data, but ultimately, if we look at the issue in the context of hotel operations, you can do already so much if you have the right leadership, if you have basic monitoring system, and that doesn't even have to be advanced, right. And if you have the right shift of mindset that is cultivated by the culture of the organizations. Those three components already can have massive impact on food waste.
I'm sure, and it's in 2026. It's refreshing to hear a business talk about technology not being the end all be all of.
Yeah, I mean, no, but seriously, I think it has to be discussed because, of course, it's pleasant, to think of it. Oh, you just need to plug something and it solves the issue. But no, if you know the reality of the back of house and the functioning of, we're talking about hotels, right? But let's talk about like convention centers,
right,
or shopping malls, or theme parks, or all the catering for airline industry. Everywhere there is food that is prepared and is going through so many different steps, massive, complex, I would say, supply chain or processes from the moment the raw food arrives all the way to the consumer. It's not only about technology. It will be about mindset, right, because you still have people, and it will be also about being able to review procedures and ensure that those procedures are respected. So the technology, again, to me, is an enabler. It does a lot, and probably will do more than before, but is not a silver bullet. Let's put it this way.
Makes sense. And sort of talking about just your personal experience in that journey as well. So you've seen a lot of, I'm sure, tragic cases of food waste in various ways. In 13 years of doing this, do you still find yourself being surprised by what's happening, or have you seen it all already?
I do still sometimes. Well, the good thing is, because of that journey, came a moment where actually I was no longer doing operations. Right. So especially when it started to scale during COVID, I had to step back. I had to train my team and having them to do the work. And also because of that digitalization and the COVID period, it all kind of became a bit theoretical, even though it was not. But we were, training them, getting them to use the technology, collect data. We had all the pictures, but in a non tangible way, as in like we can see and feel and smell this awful issue, and then started to go back into operation. Also, to question our model, to challenge our approach, etc., etc. And so yes, it really stuck me again and hit me recently again, where we were working on events. And seeing huge batches of food, beautiful food, and then they just go and I don't know, it hurts me. It does, and I think that I'm hoping and I believe that if more people were seeing this as is, they may change their perspective on this issue.
I'm sure, but yeah, I mean that's exactly why you're doing what you're doing, right? To bring about that change.
Yeah, and shocking time. I'm thinking of another anecdote, which was really also a turning point. So we're working in a island country where you have many luxurious hotels. That's the main industry. And I was shocked because before arriving, I was asking the team, can you share with me your waste report, the type of data you may have. And then, you would see glass, plastic, organic. And then you would see one line which was food waste to the sea.
Food to the sea?
Food waste to the sea, you're like, what?
And so food waste wasn't bad enough, they had to add to the sea.
Yeah, but hold on. And then I'm like, whoa, intense. So arrive on the island. So same, it was kind of back in the days where we do like full implementation, multiple days, multiple people, covering everything. And I would discuss with the chef. And I was like, well, how do you handle, because islands, right? Island resorts. How do you handle your organic waste? Oh yeah, well, we got the local that comes in and pick it up. I was like, okay, and what do they do with it? Well, they go to the lagoon and then they dump it. I'm like, okay. He was like, yeah, but it's a bit funny because, recently they got lazy, so they dumped it much closer. And actually they happened to dump it next to one of the sites where we bring our customers to go and dive. The issue with dumping food on a regular basis brought bigger fishes that brought sharks right next to where they're bringing their luxury guests to dive, including bull sharks that were not being seen in that area. I'm like, whoa. And then repeating that experience a couple of years later in that same country, where they had an eco center, and actually where they were meant to deal with all their waste, but it was just a joke. It was just a facade, where I was asking, okay, how do you deal with that? So first, they had a big furnace where they were actually burning everything. And you could hear, even when they were taking the bags, you could hear the clinking of the glass and the blasting. I was like, whoa. Then I was looking on the wall, and it was written like the policy was dump ashes to ocean when full. I was like, whoa, serious? Then I saw like on the plastic side, and there was the guy running this kind of dumpster. I was like, what do you do with the plastic? He goes, oh, we shred it. Okay, cool. Can you show me? So I turned on the shredder, took a piece of wood, and took one of those plastic bottle and 5 liters, put in there. Almost lost his hand while he did it, and it makes those tiny pieces of plastic. I was like, okay, and then you're like, well, then we bury it in the sand. I was like, are you okay? Cool, guys, so that you can reclaim land and build more houses. So you see what I mean? Like, it's an entire mindset of thinking linear when you have constraints related to where you operate your business that do not make sense. And then so we asked, what do you do with the organic? So same story, local comes and pick it up. So we decided to come at 5 a.m. Where they are collecting those bins, and I have a video I could share with you. We get on the jetty and we decided to go on the boat with the guys. They load the bins, and we go 2-3 miles in the lagoon. And one of my consultant had a GoPro and the mask, and he jumped in the water to have footage from underneath, and I was on the deck shooting, and they started to dump But obviously the team at the time were not well trained and they didn't know where the organic waste would go. So it was not properly segregated. So you have plastic and gloves and all those crap that were like, and the locals, they were never paid for that and they didn't being asked to sort it out. So they were just like dumping. And you will see that in the beautiful water, and then comes the bin, the gray bin with the ashes. And I was like, no. And then, they pulling the ashes and dump it, and the footage from below makes that huge cloud of ashes with the heavy particle that sank at the bottom of the lagoon and the partially burned items that floating around. You're like, oh my God, we're doomed. We're fucked. This is so. Those are some of my milestone moments. Where like, okay, if we don't do something, this country is gone in 20 years. And biodiversity, you're gonna be, you're gonna be blue and white sand, and that's it. No authority doing anything. So it's kind of my my grassroots approach, or my the mission I impose on myself to change things.
Yeah, I mean it's shocking to hear all of that because again, so in fact the earlier example you shared about the convention center where the food was being dumped. So when I think about food waste, that's where my imagination ends. Yeah. But just talking about dumping food and ashes and unsegregated waste into the ocean, just a free for all in a supposedly luxury island. So it's
but think about that. I mean, how many people think about where their bins are going?
I don't. I mean, that's the honest truth, right? I don't. Yeah,
so if everybody was started to think, where is what I'm putting in my bin then going, and then what?
Right.
Sure that the consumption would shift. Well, I guess the consumption would shift, or the way we buy and consume items that are all wrapped and super wrapped and triple wrapped. I guess that people would think differently. So in Thailand, for the organic waste, it's a bit different because in many occasions, if properly segregated, it is being sent to the pig farm, for instance, or the fish farms.
Okay,
which is good because you have the hierarchy of solutions to food waste that matter a lot between what are the most or the least impactful ways to tackle food waste. Avoidance and prevention is the most important one. That's what we focus on with LightBlue and the pledge. But second best option is to feed people if the food is suitable. So that's the same pyramid we're following when we implement the pledge on food waste for event. Prevent as much as you can. Food surplus being kept in a safe way to be redistributed for charity. And what remains, organic waste that is not good enough for human consumption, can it go to feed animals, ideally animals that will re-enter the human food chain, or can it be transformed to something valuable that is much better than sending to the landfill? Because the killer is organic waste to landfill leads to methane. And methane is somewhere between 25 to plus times more potent than carbon dioxide
as a greenhouse gas.
Yes, as a greenhouse gas, exactly. So it's awful. But again, most people don't know that or don't see the link.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you're bringing attention to all of these things as well, including through this conversation. So thanks for that. Now, we talked about off camera the food waste that's happening at Indian weddings, for example, and we know that after this conversation you're packing your bags going to India. But jokes apart, are there any sort of gaps that you see outside of the enormous ones that you're already trying to fill? But any let's just not call them gaps. Let's call them opportunities. Do you see any key opportunities that you feel are untapped that either you are working on, or even you feel that that's not your priority at the moment, but you'd like somebody else to maybe?
Yeah, but that's the thing. If once you start looking at it, you see it everywhere, and that's crazy because most people eat 3 times a day. Right. In Thailand, we eat more like 5 times a day, so everywhere where food is stored, I would say transformed, stored, consume or dispose of, there are opportunities to work on this issue, and we are just on that food service kind of vertical. But as you asked me earlier, if we were dealing with the consumers, not yet. But if you go up the food supply chain, it's just ridiculous. If you look at the primary, production or extraction, let's say like farms or fishery, there's already an enormous amount of food that is wasted at that level. So there are some interesting studies that we touch on the modules, on what we call the masterclass, the e-learning modules I was referring to, where we look at those studies. So how much is lost at each of those steps? So primary production, transformation and manufacturing, wholesale, food service, and then consumers. At each of those steps, there is food loss at the beginning, you call it this way, and then food waste. So luckily there are some solutions, but it's just like it's minimal compared to the size of the issue. So there's some very interesting study we're sharing about from a colleague in the US that look at different farms for vegetable. Right. And out of the harvest, let's say 100 is the total that you could harvest, there is only 40% that makes it to the market. There's another 35 or 40% that is, the remaining is still in the ground and is not even harvested. And out of what remains, let's say those 60% of volume that is not harvested, half of it could be consumed, is safe to be consumed.
I see.
So it's not being harvested because it's either looking bad, so you cannot sell it because aesthetically speaking it's not matching the standard. Okay. So supermarket wouldn't buy it, or it is not economically viable because of the market fluctuation to actually spend the effort to collect that food and feed people. So there is, obviously a much larger picture here of the influence of markets and commodities on the practice at that level, but that's just one level. And then there is all the other steps I referred to. But even without moving from our vertical, we hardly started to work on, as I mentioned, you have theme parks, you have all the campuses of universities, you have anywhere where there is food, so from jails to shopping malls to the cruise lines to it's just massive. So opportunities everywhere.
It's fascinating to hear because, like I said, there's the food supply chain is pretty complex, right? So there's wastage at each step. So there's so many opportunities to even cut down a little. I think it would trickle down to the rest of the chain as well. So,
so I'm in discussion now with an entrepreneur that maybe we're gonna partner with. That is building a company called Shopwhy, and I love the model. They want to connect the producers with unsold food surplus with the food service players that could benefit from having cheaper products, knowing that they need anyway those products, and that otherwise those products would be wasted. So it's a win-win on those. So it's kind of a marketplace of unwanted product or unsold food items that are finding a new route, a new purpose. And for this, there are so many opportunities still laying out there. So economically speaking, also that actually makes sense, and not just for the good sake of it.
Yeah, I'm sure. And then, like we discussed at the beginning of the conversation, right, that I think is to make a change at such a large scale. I think the economic incentive needs to be really driven hard in terms of how important it is. Just the pure dollar numbers make sense, and if the pure dollar numbers make sense, then everything else just falls into place. Yeah. Perfect. So now, Ben, that brings me to the last question of the day, and let's try to end on a positive note. So obviously you're trying to tackle a hard to tackle problem, and we've heard your story. It's been challenging and surprising and shocking and all of those things. But what gives you hope? So what gives you hope about the future of how we consume food and produce food, and what is that one silver lining that keeps you going for the next 13?
Yeah, with 13, right? We are teenagers still, so a lot to grow. What gives me hope, I would say, is I see a change happening. Luckily, like if I compare now from 13 years ago, there is a growing awareness. I would say it's also what gives me hope is to work with the right people. So being surrounded by people that know what we do matters and makes an impact, and that's both like within LightBlue, within the pledge, but it's also with the type of partners we are working with, and to see that some that are genuinely interested in making an impact is super refreshing, and my hope is driven also by the fact that well, the alternative is not acceptable. So it's, it's just like, well, it has to go, and that's a bit of story of my life. Every time is I was navigating based on where I felt the outcome would anyway be better than the status quo. So that's also by nature, I would say.
I can imagine. I mean, it needs an optimist to be in the line of work you are.
Yeah.
But that's a great message to end at. I hope you keep the optimist alive and keep continuing to do what you're doing.
Yes.
So I appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us, and we'll see you in 2039.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for the invitation.
It's been a pleasure, and we'll hopefully have lots more conversations both on and off camera.
Yeah, would love to.
Thanks for your time. Thanks to Margot who's behind the camera. Thanks for making that happen. And to the audience who tuned in, we really appreciate you taking the time to watch this episode. Thanks to True Digital Park for hosting us, and we'll see you all in the next episode.